wasn't too long before the draft came along. I remember that, and then I did what was requested. I met downtown Milwaukee and took the oath, and then we were all sent to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, for some briefing and some testing and some answering questions. And then it didn't take a couple. It was cold that late fall, and it was in November. And then I was assigned to take basic training. I was hoping I would be sent to a warmer climate or a warmer region, but I was sent to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, which was a artillery camp for World War II. They reopened it, and it was pretty cold up there. And then one day, a quota came down, apparently from 5th Army headquarters, that they would like some students at the Adjutant General School right out of Indianapolis for recreation and, well, it was recreation and sports and conditioning. And my company commander at the time thought it was really a continuation of physical education and drilling and things like that. But in actuality, it turned out to be the same as the old special service that existed for the purpose of recreation and entertainment from World War II. Eventually, we were told that we would be boarding ship and heading for Korea. And then that didn't take too long, and we landed. The ship had to unload us on barges, which weren't very deep, to get into the shore. The main part of the ship stayed out a ways, and as we approached the shore, we saw a long line of American soldiers with soft caps and soft wear, and they were waiting to board these barges and get back on the ship to go home. And as we walked past them, we didn't really know what to expect. We were very quiet, and they kind of razzed us there, saying, "Oh, there's my replacement," etc. But none of us said a thing. We just did what we were told to do. And as we approached further on, we saw how Incheon, that was the name of the city, was pretty well bombed out. And then the sergeant, I think he was sergeant major or master sergeant, he was older, and you could tell that I thought he had been a long time in the Army. And eventually he had a roster of all of the men there. And he started calling off names and telling them where to go or where to report. And finally, all the men were gone except me. And I couldn't help but think that if this were a movie, here I am standing all by myself. And the sergeant major scratched his head and he walked towards me. And he said, "Corporal Kostka, what the heck is a MOS number 2442? And I said, "Well, Sergeant, that's enlisted entertainment specialist, enlisted man." And he said, "Well, where in the heck am I going to do with you?" "Well, wait a minute," he said. "There's a fellow, a Corporal Fanning, that goes back to Division Rear and picks up 16mm films once a week and shows them to we fellows. And so you report to Corporal Fanning." And I did. And he taught me a little bit more about how we were going to run the projector off of a generator and this and that and a few other things. And I started to show movies at different places as he directed. And that's how I got started. In the summertime, we had Marilyn Monroe come. And I was in charge of helping to supervise the building of that stage. We usually used 75-gallon steel drums, and then had the Korean labor carpenters make a flooring, and went from there with a tent in the back And we didn't need any heat that time because in the summertime it got nice and warm. And so what do I remember of Marilyn Monroe? Well, because of the fact I was sort of supervising a bit, I had an opportunity of staying on stage, sort of in the wings, sort of in the background. I think I stood with another fellow about 15 feet away from Marilyn Monroe. The fellows out there sitting couldn't see us very well, but we could see her. And she came out in a purple sequence dress. And we looked pretty hard at that purple sequence dress. And she sang, "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." And the boys really enjoyed it, and the other fellow and myself, to this day, would swear that we didn't think she had anything underneath that purple sequence dress. There was a certain amount of danger. I'm going to throw in something, so it wasn't all just smile and sunshine. At one point, I was scheduling a film for our 3rd Battalion, and a corporal that picked me up in a 3/4 ton and took me and my equipment up to show a movie. He said, "Boy, Corporal, you're sure glad that you showed the movie to us in that tent on Wednesday." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, on Thursday, when we would have been there if you would have scheduled it on Thursday, it got a direct hit from a large artillery shell, or enemy artillery shell, and if that had been the case, well, I certainly wouldn't be here today." To get that particular rating of entertainment specialist, because it very likely could have kept me alive, kept me safer, and then there was talk of going back home. We were drafted for 2 years. Some of the fellows were there and were rotating. They had a rotation system. If you were there so long for the other ones who were volunteers, not drafted, then after you accumulated so many points, then they would rotate you to go home. And so they had the phone rang one day, and the sergeant of our company said, "Bag and baggage, Hal, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, at 0800. And boy, did that sound good. I got in my way to go home. Coming back on board ship from Korea, I thought to myself, well, I guess I'm one of the lucky ones. There's a lot of my buddies that didn't make it back. And there was always some discussion again as to how many men were actually killed in Korea. One source said over 54,000. Then later on, no, it was 37,000. And to this date, I still don't know the exact figure. I don't know what was the exact figure, but there were a lot of non-combatant deaths in Korea. And I think I mentioned earlier that we had bunkers collapse. We had rats that bit and poisonous. And we had self-inflicted wounds. And of course, there's so many things that are, I think, something that one has to accept when you have a large number of men under certain circumstances. It can't all be absolutely perfect.